So now this is where the real magic starts to happen, and this is when clients start getting excited. We are going to start placing our wefts. So I have a little bit of a strategic way I like to place my wefts. So we always like everything to be on display, and every little detail matters. That's why our tools look beautiful. That's why we put our hair on hangers. We want everything to be presented to the client in a very luxurious way. So first off, when it comes to color matching, I'm just using a raw blonde weft. But when you are actually placing your client's wefts, you always want to make sure that your zone 1, 2, and 3 matches your client's hair beautifully, and that's when your custom coloring is going to come into play, or the order itself when you actually order the client's hair. So keep in mind, this is just a raw weft we're using for an example. So when we are, though, doing color placement, I always like to have a game plan on how the hair is going to be placed, because I like to place my client's hair in sections. So normally you would do one weft, and then one on this side, and then one on this side, and one on this side. I like to take my 2 wefts, and I like to place them together so we don't have to adjust, move, or lift our tiny clips out of place. One, when we start shifting and moving clips, it can be a little uncomfortable for clients, and we're going to go ahead and talk about that when we get started. And 2, when you start lifting and pinching clips to move the wefts and adjust the wefts, you have a very high chance of actually losing the wefts and having weft slippage before your stitching starts. So keep that in mind. So I like to say no more than 2 wefts on the very first bead. And the reason why is we want to make sure that that weft lays as flat as possible in the very front. And we don't want to put too much weight on those front beads because we don't want to create breakage. So I'm going to show you how I start placing my wefts. So whenever I start placing my wefts, I always want to make sure my wefts are lined up perfectly with each other. So I have 2 wefts here. They're beautiful. Now you want to make sure that your weft lines up perfectly with that very front section. And this is so important. We don't want anything hanging over because we don't want to have or start any flapping. And we definitely do not want to cut these wefts, because if you cut the wefts, the hair will not last as long, and you have a higher likely chance of clients experiencing weft shedding. So we want to avoid that at all costs. So making sure that you get this right is so important. So I always want to make sure that these are lined up perfectly. And I always make sure that my wefts are perfectly lined up with my section. So I always start with a clip going across, and then I'm going to place my clips to hold them in place from the top. Now, let's get real here for a second. I cannot tell you how painful it is when a clip slides into the section. When we are placing our clips, they should be on the weft and the string. They should be on the weft and the string. So making sure that we're not pushing the clips into the actual hair that's stuck in the bead. When you hit that hair that is in the bead on your sections, it is incredibly uncomfortable, and the entire time you are stitching while that clip is sitting in that hair is going to be painful for the client. So we want to make sure that this is a relaxing, luxurious experience, and luxury does not include pain. So being very aware and conscious of how we are sliding our clips in you can hear when the actual clip is hitting that hair. So we want to make sure that we're listening and using all of our senses, really making sure that we're asking the client as we go and looking at their face to see if there's any discomfort, or body language to see if there's any discomfort, to make sure that we are doing this in a proper way. When we are clipping our hair, we want to make sure that we are pulling this tight. This should be tight along the whole beaded track. So as I'm going, I'm holding, I'm making sure it's tight, I'm making sure that I'm not putting the clips into the sections, that this process is so comfortable for our guests. Now we should have one small clip in between each bead to ensure that the weft is in place and that it's not going to slip and slide while you are doing your stitching. So, rule of thumb, you can have anywhere from 4 to 6 wefts on a beaded row. I'm going to tell you that you need to make sure that there are only 2 wefts on that front bead. We want to make sure that that is nice and tight and close to the head and that it is not bulky. Having more than 2 will create bulk. I recommend taking your next section and starting it at that 3rd bead if you are doing more than 4 wefts. So we need to make sure that we are applying the appropriate amount of hair in order to fill the client's head for the lengthening or for the desired look. Now, sometimes you're gonna come across where the weft is longer than your beaded track. Sometimes these are 12 inches, sometimes they're longer. These are made by hand. They are hand-tied wefts, which means the hair is tied on here literally by hand, hence the name. If you are coming across that your wefts are longer than your beaded track, I recommend folding them in half and placing them that way. That way you don't have to cut them and you don't have to fold them in the front. By folding them in the front, you're gonna create too much bulk. It's just not gonna work. So really making sure that you are preparing and really mapping out your roadmap to success with your weft placement is super crucial. Again, making sure that your weft section lines up perfectly, that you don't have any of the weft flapping over so the client doesn't experience flapping, and that everything is lined up beautifully and it's good to go, and that your clips are placed in a comfortable manner. If you guys have any questions about weft placement, please feel free to comment below. Again, I do not recommend any more than 6 pieces. Anything more than that is going to be too heavy, it's going to create damage, and it's going to create bulkiness. So if you want to put more than 6 pieces of hair on your client's head, I would recommend definitely splitting that up between 2 rows, and it will work out beautifully for you. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we're going to move right on to stitching.